Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Um, Hope everybody's had a good weekend. Just hope some of you were able to catch the historical comic retrospect last night. So, well, I was thinking of starting early, but I get started right into it. But I guess we lost some people there. But if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that being said, it looks like we do have at least a couple people here, so I might as well just mention what we're going to be talking about tonight already. So tonight I'm going to be going over an article from Bleeding Full from Avi Green, talking about I guess his views on the Netflix remake of the Ranma One Half anime. At least according to him, according to the headline of the article here. Um, he called Netflix's remake of Ranma One Half is much tamer than original anime. Now I don't know if that's necessarily a reflection of just the current state of affairs or what. And I'm hoping that maybe some of you who are Ranma One Half fans will be willing, as we go over the article, will be willing to contribute to the conversation in the chat. Um, Also, of course, after that, we'll have, of course, the wrestling wrap up. A lot of stuff, with going down over this past weekend with AEW with the Full Gear, as well as looking ahead to this weekend's action of Turning Point from TNA and Survivor Series in WWE, and then, of course, this day in each history. So, with all that being said, why don't we get right into the article then? And as I said, if anything that we talk about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. And and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. And as I said, if there's anybody in here who is a particular Ranma One Half fan, you feel free to contribute to the conversation in the chat there, if you will. So let's get into this then. So Netflix's remake of Ranma One Half is much tamer than original anime. Article by Avi Green published November 25th. Hey, Metal! Most of it is because Ranma still airs on live TV in Japan half an hour before it goes live on Netflix, and TV standards have changed. Okay, that's I guess that's one aspect of it. All right, so let's get into this article then. And of course, Metal, feel free to contribute as much as you'd like. All right, so as anyone familiar with veteran mangaka Rumiko Takahashi's writings may know, the anime adaptation of Ranma One Half was recently remade and especially for broadcast on notorious Netflix, no less. I guess Avi is another one of those who's not a big fan of Netflix and how they do things, I guess. um, it's now the subject of this recent Answer Men column at Anime News Network, which most unfortunately lurches into lecturing as to why, in contrast to the original 1989 to 96 anime productions, there were, in parentheses, there were also at least one more entry in 2008, on parentheses. The nudity is toned down most peculiarly. Peculiarly. Yeah, and Metal. I think if I remember on at least one of your shows that I did pop in on, I think even you mentioned that they did tone down the nudity a bit, if I remember correctly. So correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But anyways, here we go. So this is from the article from Anime News Network that Avi's referencing here. So why have they chosen not to include the boobs, the nipples, and the butt cracks that were freely on display in the original Ranma 1/2 series, which first aired in Japan in April of 1989? 1. Global anime audiences have moved on from traditional anime fan service. The audience mix is younger and more diverse, both gender-wise, culturally, and ethnically, than ever before. And with that comes different perspectives and standards, as well as expectations. You know, the thing I myself have a bit of a problem with that reasoning. Now I've watched my fair share of anime, particularly a lot of the stuff from the '90s and 2000s. Okay, and one of the beautiful things about animes, particularly from that time period, before we started really censoring it and going all PC and all that, is that you really got a good. I think you've got a pretty good idea of you know Japanese culture from it. And at least their perspective on the world. And I think in a lot of ways, for me personally, I find it quite refreshing. Some of the animes I've watched over here, like for example, Le Chevalier d'Eon, right? That one, again, the Japanese perspective on the things going around, like in late 18th century Europe, the late 18th century world as a whole, late 1700s there, granted with some mysticism thrown in there to kind of spice things up a bit. Let me see. But I find, and I know that even what Metal's comment here was earlier, how TV standards has changed, So, anyways, continuing on with the article here. In 1989, anime creators wanted to make a hit anime that as many people as possible would enjoy. But that prism of success was very local and very specific. Japanese audiences watching early evening anime slot on Fuji TV, in parentheses, one of the original co-producers, unparentheses. So basically, depending upon the time frame, they're saying early evening there. That's at what, 5, 6 o'clock. That's a lot of times when, at least in Japan, that's basically by the time kids might be getting home, and depending upon what year of school they're in, maybe they're getting home. Because obviously they have the school day, and then they have after school activities, and they don't get home till like 5, 6 o'clock, and they're watching animes as they're doing homework or prepping dinner or what have you. So, 2, the global audience for strong female leads in a long-running anime series no longer sees fan service as a necessary ingredient in their enjoyment of the aforementioned program. Fan service is a niche interest for a small segment of the audience and a mild distraction for the majority of the audience at best. Well, I guess I can kind of see some of that. I mean, it depends upon how you use the fan service, right? I mean, and depending upon the context, as always, I mean, because I think one of the I don't know what you'd call it, but one of the popular tomes or memes of anime is the whole, I don't know what you'd call it exactly, but is the hot springs episode. Particularly a lot of slice of life anime, a lot of harem anime. You have the Hot Springs episode where the characters all take a trip to a hot spring somewhere. Usually for maybe they go to the beach. And, they go stay at the beach. I mean, you see, either the idea of going to the beach or going to a hot spring. And you get the fan service there, and at least in those contexts, it can actually be, quite a. It can be quite a good driver. You know. This version is also a lot closer to the manga. There is still nudity, but about as much as was in the manga. Though they had to remove the nipples for TV standards. Well, based on what they were saying here too, and some of what they were saying, Metal, maybe you can answer this. Do you believe that when they made the original anime, that maybe they hyped up the sex a little bit? Maybe they actually added more nudity to the anime than was in the manga in order to maybe try to draw in more of an audience, particularly a male oriented audience. Again, would like to see your comment in the chat soon here on that, answering that question. Do you believe maybe they were hyping up the fan service in order to try to draw in more of an audience? Anyways, getting back to the article here. Let's see. 3. A lot more women and girls watch anime these days. I would like to think that most anime creators welcome this development and want to make programming that is as attractive to the growing segment of the audience as it is to the males, which is true. Seeing strong women and also seeing more, with women characters and with lead female characters, and maybe having some fan service the other way for the girls too, right? Having a whole bunch of guys that scantily clad might bring more of them in as well. And in 4, as anime becomes more accessible and more popular around the world, the average age of anime audiences continues to fall, with some surveys claiming that as much as half the audience is aged 10 to 18. It is understandable, then, that some shows created for mass appeal globally may tone down or remove fan service. And again, I think it depends upon the age group too. Yes, you could probably keep more of the fan service in when it's like 15 to 18, but maybe 10 to 14. I could see them maybe toning down the 10 to the fan service for the 10 to 14-year-olds. But again, it also goes back to, well, what specific anime are we talking about, right? Is it a slice of life one? Is it a let's see if a bit, yeah, they lingered on the nudity a lot longer, and even added in some episodes since that original series was 47% filler. So basically what you're saying is the original series was almost half filler right there. We're just shy of being half filler right there. That's an interesting little notation. Okay. So anyways, let's get back to the article here. We're now, of course, getting back to Avi's commentary here. So this is Avi speaking now. Now, I honestly find the whole shape-shifting between male and female premise Ranma 1/2 icky, but let's put that aside and comment, if anything, upon number 3. It's laughable to say women and girls literally have a problem with nudity in all instances, especially considering the manga was originally created by a woman who, if I'm correct, even ran a studio at the height of her career with at least a few more female employees. Maybe women would have an issue with making a joke out of nudity, but to say virtually all women think the same is supremely silly, as it's lecturing to say nothing short of insulting to the intellect. A better question would be, if it's Ranma we're talking about, why would a boy want to see Ranma's female form nude, knowing this is actually a boy who's been cursed with a bizarre magic that turns him into a female form when doused with cold water, and back to male when doused with hot? Or is it the other way around regarding temperatures? Seriously, that's awfully icky, in my humble opinion. Yeah, actually, that whole gender bending stuff, that's actually kind of the reason I've stayed away from Ranma one half. Just, I'm not too keen on that idea either. But to each his own, though. To each his own. Let's see. There is a chapter in the manga that I'll be interested to see how they adapt, called Bathhouse Battle, where Ranma is nude for the majority of it. Because it's fun. Oh, I see what you're saying. The reason, I guess you're answering Avi's question as to why they would have kind of the back and forth, and why boys would want to see a boy's female form, even though knowing that he's a boy. And I think that's your answer because it's funny. Yeah, I guess I can get that humor too. But anyways, let's see. But putting that aside, the columnist does little to explain how the quote unquote majority of the alleged audience finds fan service distracting, depending what exactly it is we're talking about. I suppose the question is whether most audiences today are even interested in romantic tales of a heterosexual nature. Nor does he explain why the producers of Ranma One Half are obligated to market this specific story to whoever the audience is he's talking about. Good point. I mean, I think most mangakas would sit there, they write the stuff, and they find their audience and focus on that audience. They don't try to pander to, unlike here in the States, they don't try to sit here and pander to any specific individual in or group. So why must they brew up a remake instead of develop a new separate story unrelated to Ranma One Half? And curious how any discussion of violent content isn't raised here, because valid queries can be brought up as to whether most women and girls enjoy that any more than nudity. There's another serious double standard in this mishmash. Some valid questions could also be raised as to whether children really do read manga if they're not reading much of USA comics. And simultaneously, doesn't the columnist claim contradict what I thought was the main goal of Japanimation? To convince people the medium can be for adults as much as children? Such hypocrisy right there. So, Metal, if you're still, I hope you're still here. Any thoughts on that particular analysis from Avi? I'll continue on to the next thing, but if you want to respond to that question, I just was wondering, any thoughts on? Rumiko Takahashi had already been so successful from stories like Urusei Yatsura and Maizan Ikoku. By the time Ranma was made, that she could have made anything without considering audience. Yeah, because she hasn't proven. Yeah, I mean, look at the work she's been involved. You just mentioned two of them right there. We're talking about a third. So Ranma one half, Urusei Yatsura, Maizani Koku, and I also believe if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Metal, but I think if I understand correctly, didn't Rumiko Takahashi also do Inuyasha? And if she did, that one was also pretty bad. Now that one came after this, obviously, but still, I mean, she's got a proven track record of success, so she knows she's gonna find her audience. Yeah, Inuyasha was after round. Yeah, I do know that much. But Mermaid Saga was before this. Ah, okay. Yeah. Again, Inuyasha was the only reason I brought that one up because that was the other one that I was aware of. Even though I know Inuyasha was after this. So as you put out, so you pointed out there. So, anyways, and look, see, we kind of got another kind of nude scene here with the girl right here, of course, from behind. So we're not seeing anything, aside from maybe, her, portion, her behind there. You know, you know, we're not really seeing anything that's going to cause, you know, too much of a stink. So, so let's see. So, and then here's Avi speaking again. I took a look at the accompanying forum thread and found some more worth pondering. For example, so this is from, I guess, an accompanying forum thread that was talking about it. So here we go. I understand why the decision was made, but I don't have to like it. In this specific instance, as opposed to other shows, I think the nudity served a well. They say an purpose, but it's supposed to be a purpose. Even if Rumiko Takahashi isn't going to say it outright. In parentheses here, she certainly hasn't said anything about the numerous trans reads that have been made regarding Ranma One Half, such as Susan J. Napier's analysis of the narrative in anime from Akira to Hal's Moving Castle. In fact, Hal's Moving Castle just celebrated a anniversary the other day, 20 years since it came out, by the way. I pointed it out on the show the other day. Experiencing contemporary Japanese animation, unparentheses. Let's see. Let me see if. All right. Also, the remake is done specifically in partnership with Netflix Japan and Nippon Television, with the target at Japanese audiences first. Okay. Well, here's another question then too. If the primary focus is more Japanese audiences, as to I guess a point you made earlier, have do you believe that Japanese television standards have changed since 1989, since like um, 35 years ago? In the last, do you believe that Japanese television standards have changed in the last 35 years? Anyways, let's get back to the article here while I wait for see if Metal will answer that one. Let's see. I think the use of nudity in Ranma 1 half served to create a not only subtextual but textual discussion of how we look at bodies based on gender and what is or is not considered acceptable based on societal norms, and the ways that they can be somewhat hypocritical, in parentheses, such as the scene with female presenting Ranma walking from the bath um, with his shirt off, Akane calling him out, and female presenting Ranma being indignant because he's a guy, on parentheses there. Let me see if. Yes, a lot. All right, answering my question there. And the West has had a lot of influence on that fact. Yeah, I do know that much because I know Yellow Flash has talked a lot about that too. How the West, particularly through particularly how especially how through Sony, they've tried to kind of force changes in anime that a lot of fans, a lot and creators are not happy with. Let's see, and old streetlight saying this stream is so sigma. What do you mean by so sigma? I don't understand what you mean by so sigma. What's that? Is that supposed to be a good thing or a bad thing? I'm hoping it's a good thing. But anyways, getting back to the article, of course. Um, like by comparison, 2.5D seduction in parentheses, which is also currently airing on parentheses, also has some cheesecake elements in the source material. And in parentheses here, I haven't had the opportunity to read the manga yet, but I have seen some page to screen comparison on parentheses. Has some incidental nudity. Um, I don't have a problem with omission of the nudity there because there it is. Um, in parentheses, generally gratuitous and doesn't serve a thematic purpose in quite the same way. Whereas here, I think it served a purpose. So this is within the article, especially compared to Yurusei Yatsura and Maizani Koku. Rumiko Takahashi was in a position at this point in her career where she didn't need to put nudity in a work to get published or keep it from being canceled, and nor were her editors really in a position to pressure her to include nudity. This was a conscious artistic choice on her part at the time of publication. Before I can, let's see what else we have here. Same thing has happened in gaming with the Japanese ratings board. Several, yeah, I've been seeing a lot of headlines regarding like Dragon's Gate and a few others. I know you've talked probably about them on your Thursday shows too, about some of those. Um, I actually don't have a show today. It just want to come on and explain some of this. Well, what so if you want to join me then, Metal for the show here. I guess I can send you the link. I'll send you the link here, and then if you want to pop in and join in, and as we're reading this, I am free. Well, I just sent you the link, so if you wanna pop in and join me and well, kind of go over the article together here. There he is. Hey,
Hey,
Metal.
how you doing?
All right, no show tonight.
Nope, nope. Marsupial's got like a really big project at work that's important, so he's going to be like cramming that for the next couple weeks, maybe even working around Thanksgiving weekend. I
Oh,
planned some other stuff while he's not available, but he only just told me that today, so it was a little short notice. I'm like, I've got some stuff I need to work on in the evening anyway. I'm just gonna cancel tonight.
all right. If I don't know if you have already, but if you haven't, if you want to share out the links to bring everybody here, we can continue to talk about, go over the article here and
Yeah.
talk about. This one was a pretty lengthy article, so that's why I only was doing this one tonight. And we're already at the 32-minute mark. So,
Mhm.
uh, but I know you're kind of a big Ranma one half fan, and I know you've been talking a lot about the remake here. So I figured, if
Yeah,
I
you'll
had
be hard pressed to find many people that have read the manga or watched the original series as many times as I have, or engaged in any of the side content like different video games and whatnot.
yeah. So what do you think of the article so far? What do you think of how I'm covering it and all that?
Coverage is fine. Um, the article makes Avi look as stupid as normally. I don't know. Every single time we cover an article with him, just like, is he brain dead? I don't know. Um,
Well,
yeah,
I think the thing is I think there are times, and I now that I think about it, I think there are times he does seem to have more of a Puritan type attitude
yeah.
uh, towards a lot of entertainment. I mean, even
I am
more
mostly
so.
joking. I don't think he's stupid. I think he does jump into a lot of conversations that he just is not well versed on, though. It's more ignorance than anything.
Hmm. All right, so I guess
Yeah.
we'll continue. I'll continue reading the article, and then just if anything, again, as always, if anything that he says or anything that's said either by him or by articles he's referencing, they grab your attention. Just
I talk about the Puritan part though. Like I did laugh pretty hard when he said that it was icky, and I was like, "Oh, that's the language you're going to use here." But most of us just find it funny. There's a humor to the novelty of seeing what life is like as the other sex, but also the fact that he has no control over it in both directions, right? Like you could choose to put hot water or cold water on yourself, but you also can't choose if somebody else throws hot water or cold water on yourself too, which leads to a lot of comedic situations.
right. Well, I mean, for me, and you probably heard me
Yeah.
say it too. I mean, for me, the thing why I've steered clear of it is the whole switching back and forth. It's just something I wasn't sure I really wanted to partake in.
Well, I could say at least from the perspective of Ranma as a character, and
Uh,
most of the characters in the show, there's nothing inherently sexual about it. Um, though there are definitely some where it's like, well, they're attracted to him, which attraction is a sexual thing. Um, there's only one character, which will probably be a filter for a lot of the negative section of the audience that just came in. named Haposai, but he won't come in for a couple seasons. But when he comes in, that guy is that classic massive pervert master, kind of like a Master Roshi type character.
Uh,
And he is actually like Ranma's father's master. And also Akane's father's master. And he goes around panty raids and steals women's panties and stuff. And he's always trying to get Ranma to wear like women's lingerie and everything. And him being a pervert and a villain is actually a major plot point, both dramatically and comedically. But it's a good filter. It drives a lot of people out of a series that probably shouldn't be there.
oh, you mean basically people who probably shouldn't be watching it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, tourists.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's continue with the article here then, and see where we go with it. Oh, and just so you know, I'm taking Thursday and Friday off this week, so I won't be doing shows on Thursday and Friday. Just but,
I probably should take Thursday off.
Hmm.
I don't know if I will though.
All right. So, anyways, so here we go with continuing with the article here, and this is not obviously this is from the article he's referencing.
Yeah. That's one thing I've been trying to keep track of. His use of quotations have been liberal enough that it's like I can't really tell sometimes when it's him speaking or the other article that he was referencing.
Well, if you as you notice, I will usually say, okay, this is him speaking, and this is from the article he's referencing. I usually will make that clear, try to make it as clear as possible. So, anyways, now is this an instance where changes in societal mores in Japan to go in a more sexually repressive and conservative direction may have caused pressure to tone down the nudity? Actually, I don't think that that's the case, because I even know that Yellow Flash even talked about this a while back. But I think if anything, there are people in government over in Japan who, if anything, they're trying to encourage more sex, not less.
Oh, yes. They are pronatalist in Japan in general. They don't understand how to get their country to have more sex. I mean, they definitely don't want premarital sex if it can be avoided. But I think a lot of them right now are like, listen, even if the kids in high school just start fooling around with each other, it would lead to more babies in the nation.
Right. That's a big part of the reason. I mean, I think from what I understand, the Japanese Diet had even tried to kind of, I guess, commission some mangakas to try to make some more, sexually explicit manga to try to encourage.
Well, it's not even just sexually explicit too, right? They're trying to encourage families more than anything. They've like straight up just commissioned what is essentially family propaganda. Spy Family is straight up just family propaganda. It's propaganda that you or I might agree with, but it's family propaganda. And a lot of this was done during Abe, Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe's run before, he was assassinated. He was a big pronatalist. There's even memes around it where they'll just have a picture of Abe and it'll say like "have sex" on it.
Yeah. Well, also you may have noticed I decided to do a little sub headline there, host. If you want to do that yourself as well, feel free to. Should have said that before too. But anyways, so back to the argument. Possibly was there pressure to cupify the characters to ensure they get those Saudi investment fund dollars, in parentheses, or other countries where there's more restrictive content? Possibly. I guess they forgot to, unless, I guess from the looks of it, it looks like they had a real long parenthesis there. I just wish there was a place on the spectrum for, quote, narratively significant but non-sexual nudity, unquote, between, quote, generally chaste, nudity-free fan service, unquote, i.e., in parentheses, i.e., what I described in 2.5D seduction, parentheses, and, quote, literally porn, in parentheses here, i.e., the various rants influenced isekai
Mm.
series.
Well, Japan wouldn't qualify some of those as porn, even if we would. They do have there's like that blurred line. There's etchy is what they would call it, right? But especially if we're talking about rants influence over here, we would definitely call a lot of that porn,
Hmm.
or at least erotica.
Yeah. All right. Well, the whole idea is,
Yeah.
and the thing is, I've watched my fair share of slice of life animes, and I do see, there has been quite, even in some of the older stuff that I mentioned, right? There is
Yeah.
some suggestibility there in a, few of. I mean, you look at anime like Please Teacher and Please Twins, right? Or
Yeah.
Sister Princess. You look at some of that. You know, granted, some they do. And sometimes Japan does delve into some topics that some people might be a little wary about. Like, I don't remember the exact title of it, but there actually was an anime. And I watched it. I watched it myself, but there was an anime where a 27-year-old man, apparently he and a 27-year-old man and I guess his 13, 14-year-old sister, they were separated. The parents had, I guess,
Yeah.
divorced. The son went with the father, the girl went with and then they met on a, she was on her way back because she was going to go to school. And then, you probably, if I describe it a little bit, they met on a train. He didn't know she was her sister. He had just broken up with his girlfriend, and then it all kind of devolved into like where basically they were kind of involved with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't Kimi some. I think that it started with a K, but or something like that. But it's one of those things that I know that a lot of people would probably have an issue with if they saw it.
Well, that's another thing that I think a lot of creators in Japan still understand that we used to understand here, and the difference between reality and fiction, right?
Mhm.
One of the reason, even if you go outside of sexually explicit works like hentai, which
Mhm.
hentai literally just means pervert or perversion in
Mhm.
Japanese, right? You might
Mhm.
even hear somebody call a character hentai hentai in the Japanese dub if they're calling them a pervert, because that's all it means.
Mhm.
Outside of perverted works, you do still even see like stories of incest and stuff like that. And it's not because this stuff is normal or even normalized, like the Japanese people would respect that happening, but because it's fantasy and you get to explore weird and interesting things that you don't normally get to explore in real life in a fantasy setting.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. So, anyways, getting back to the article, we're already at the 43-minute mark
Yeah.
here. So, I'm going to try to speed things along a little bit here. And now we're back to Avi speaking here. So, I thought Takahashi did address the subject for quote unquote trans reads in some sense. In any event, I wish these people would ask whether the whole premise was in good taste to begin with. A character who shapeshifts isn't what I consider the best way to convey quote unquote fan service.
I wouldn't even call it fan service. I think he's misreading this right here. Right. The whole point is Takahashi tends to just write stories that have they're fantasy stories, so there's some weird twist to it, and they're usually rom coms or some type of romance story that involves like a mostly normal girl and some guy that has some magical thing about that person. Sometimes it's the opposite, which Urusei Yatsura, one of her most famous works, is the opposite in that case.
Where the
And
guy
sometimes
is
they're
normal, the girl is kind of weird.
like an alien, yeah. Sometimes, she will occasionally write something where there's no supernatural thing, like in Maisa Nikoku or 1 Pound Gospel. There was no supernatural stuff. But then you have things like Ranma, where Ranma's the magical one in this case because he is cursed and transforms back and forth between a guy and a girl. Inuyasha, where he's literally half demon. Her most recent one, Mao, who is also kind of cursed, but then it turns out that the main character is cursed too. That's the subversion that comes later. But you also have Rinne, Circle of Reincarnation, where the guy is like a Shinigami, like a reaper of sorts, and he's like getting rid of spirits in the school. This is just like a trend of her storytelling because she just likes to write fantastic works. I think the service is more towards herself though, because she said many times she enjoys writing sexy or beautiful women and men who butt heads, usually like jerks. They're nice guys at their core, but they're jerks, right? That's the people she likes to write. There's a trope called the jerk with a heart of gold, and there's
Are
kind of
these
like a
like the
joke.
himbos that they talk about?
Hmm?
Are these like the himbos that we call here in the States?
I don't know if like that. I wouldn't call him a himbo. The jerk
I
with the
think himbo is like a male bimbo.
yeah,
Or
I know, like Ken in the Barbie movie, right? Would be a himbo,
well, I
or
think
like
some people
any
would call
beach
Guy
bum.
from Naruto a himbo.
I wouldn't call a guy a himbo, but if people want to, no, jerk with a heart of gold is kind of like the opposite pairing to the like the tsundere, right? Where it's like this guy, he comes off as a jerk to everyone, but at the end of the day, he actually does the right thing, right? This applies to like Ranma. Inuyasha is that type of character as well. He's very rude and brash, but he's actually got a good heart to him.
Right.
I'm trying to think what
He's
the
not
rest
as
of them.
much of an ass as people may think he is.
Mm-hmm. And you have to get to know him closer. And she likes to pair this character up with the like the tsundere character a lot. It's a very common thing for her. Kagome was basically the same combination with Inuyasha, where Inuyasha was the jerk with the heart of gold, and she was the tsundere. But
Yeah, boy.
yeah, Sid boy, that's it's funny every single time.
Yeah.
But the main point I was getting at is like this is service more for her than anything, and like if you also like it, it's how a lot of authors write. It's like I'm writing a story I would like, and the rest of the audience are people who like the stories I like, right? And
Yeah. As I said
I got
earlier,
moment
she's
spaced. I
not
almost
really
can't remember
going
what
out
it
of
was.
her way trying to pander to a particular audience. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That is mostly how she writes. But there's a joke within readers of Takahashi's work. This was the point I was going to get to, where if you start a new story, you can't go more than like a couple chapters or so without seeing like the main girl character naked in a bathtub, or like in a hot spring or something, like taking a bath, because it's like it's a Takahashi story. She's going to draw the main character taking a bath. It's just what she does, you know.
All right. Well, anyways, let's get back to the
Yeah.
article here. There's quite a bit of material here. Let's see. Of course, even more worth considering is whether sexual molestation, played for cheap sensationalism, should be considered "quote unquote" fan service. I don't know. I don't know that might be more of a cultural difference than anything else.
If we're talking about how sexual molestation works in Ranma specifically, most of it is humor. It is jokes, right? Like you have the character like Kuno, who will sometimes jump onto girl Ranma, the pigtailed girl as he calls her, and start groping her or whatever. He's like, "I will date with you," and just like, he ends up getting kicked off into the distance or whatever. Like it's a joke. He's a pervert. He wants to get with the women, but none of the women want to actually get with him. You know.
That's something Japan has to reevaluate because Such notions give sex and the medium itself a bad name. Why did it ever occur to them that when you make sex look that ugly, it might have contributed to the plummeting birth rate over past decades, as some people, and I think this is Avi speaking, by the way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Because I don't think this has anything to do with their plummeting birth rate. There's a lot of other reasons.
yeah, as some people may have been embarrassed and discouraged from practicing it because of how repellent it ran the gauntlet of making sexual issues look. I guess what he's saying there is because they're making sex seem more like what you'd see on National Geographic or whatever. Therefore, people are going to turn away from it.
Maybe, but like Ranma does not apply to this topic at all. Especially because like sex isn't really involved too much. Though there are some jokes every so often, like Ranma might have chased Pichan, the little pig who's actually Ryoga, into Akane's room while she's sleeping, and then she'll wake up with Ranma over on the bed. And then everybody thinks is like, oh, Ranma, if you were trying to get some, that's fine, but be quiet about it. Like they'll make jokes about it. But the biggest tension that ever actually happens between anybody is just kissing because they're teenagers. And uh, you know, it almost has the opposite flavor where you shouldn't just like kiss anyone. It should be meaningful, right? So it's actually hard for Ranma to kiss Akane because he actually likes her. And it's something that would be meaningful.
Hmm. All right. So continuing on then. If animators could write sexuality in ways that make it look better, look in better taste, maybe we could see some improvement in how even the USA looks at these subjects. And let's not forget, graphic violence must also be reevaluated. Recalling, there's a mini series from a few years ago called Eminence and Shadow that featured decapitations, if memory serves. Western broadcasters have no issue with such ingredients that says all you need to know um, what's going wrong. Here's another comment. So now we're going back to the article he's referencing. Anything to say on what he just said right there, by the way?
I've never watched, or I'm assuming there's probably a source material to it, either a light novel or a manga, Eminence and Shadows. But in Japan specifically, they have very good age guidelines for their target audience, right? It's like the
Mm-hmm.
difference between a shonen or a seinen and stuff like that. And for the most part, people actually follow the age guidelines where they'll read down, but they won't, for the most part, read up. There's obviously going to be some youthful rebellion where it's like, hey, it's edgy to read like something that's meant for older people. But a lot of people are just more interested in stuff that's targeted towards them because it's the same like level of reading comprehension and storytelling that they're used to.
Hmm. All right, so let's get ready. Let's move on then. Let's continue on with the. So the frank discussion of sexuality in a media environment that is almost clinically uh, sanitized is what attracted many to anime in the first place. The motivation to censor is no mystery, but adopting it is destroying one of anime's many unique appeals. I don't know anyone watching this remake, and I suspect that that is because the work was popular for its raw directness, whereas the remake appears embarrassed about what it is. In the increasingly uh, samey corporate media ecosystem, most people are hungry for a unique perspective. Decisions like this are definitely just more of the same. Any
So
comments
I
on
do
that
have something
statement?
to say that maybe the reason that he doesn't know anybody watching it is because outside of Japan, Ranma's well, not just Japan, outside of Southeast Asia, Ranma's kind of niche, right? It's actually Rumiko's highest selling story if you count Southeast Asia, mostly Japan, it does well enough that it actually beats out other stories that are more popular globally, but it's kind of niche here. Most people have like maybe heard of Ranma, but they haven't watched or read it. And there's a lot of people who've never even heard it that or watch a lot of like popular anime.
Well, I'm one of
I think
those who I've heard of it, but I never watched it. So,
most
again,
people I know have never watched it until I personally sat down and showed it to them, which is one of the reasons why I've watched the show 11 times all the way through, you know, because it's
just
like,
trying to
hey,
get
we're watching this
trying to get
now.
people into it, right?
Yeah, it's like, and I'm never against watching it again. I love it, but it's like, I don't know if I would have watched it as many times as I have if it wasn't me sitting somebody down and watching it with them.
Yeah,
So
what's kind of funny, the one anime where that's kind of the same for me is actually Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho is
oh yeah, I
probably
love
the
it.
one anime that I've watched probably more than any other, like 10 or 11 times. I just love the
Yeah,
story.
it's a great one too.
Yeah,
That one's a little more popular in the West than Ranma is. I actually would say it's
yeah,
a lot more popular, but it had the benefit of airing on Toonami at one point in
hmm
time.
yeah.
Ranma, though, especially because of the sexually explicit part that he's talking about, had never actually, sexually explicit, the nudity had never actually aired on American TV anywhere. The only way you could watch it for the longest time with a VHS and then later DVD until it eventually comes to streaming services or if you're pirating it, right? It's
Mm.
from our perspective, it's always just been OVA. Despite it being on TV in Japan, which kept it pretty niche. You'd have to go out of your way to watch Ranma.
Well, I'm surprised at your statement that it was never shown here because if I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, the original Ranma one half series wasn't that dubbed by Ocean Studios? Because wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So if that's what are you saying then that it was actually shown up in Canada? Maybe not here in the States, but up in Canada because
No, I believe the Western release was originally just straight to VHS, if
okay,
I recall correctly. Um, at least here in the US, I know it never ever aired on a channel because it wouldn't pass the censors.
yeah. Well, I mean, but it could have passed. I mean, if they decided to throw it on at a late at night, you know.
Possibly, like it could have happened later. Like maybe they could have revisited after Inuyasha was popular, and you could put it on like Adult Swim late at night, but
Right.
nobody ever did.
Yeah. But because I had remembered that Ocean Theater did the dub of that. Again, now I've never watched it myself, but I do know at least some of those details.
Oh yes,
So
during the later half of the series because they changed. This is very common for long series with Ocean Studios. Was they changed actors sometimes for a role, and Ranma himself, male Ranma, was voiced by Richard Ian Cox during the later half of the series.
yeah. Oh, I know because I know particularly with another one that was actually done by the Canadian crew by
Mhm.
Ocean was Maizani Koku.
Mhm.
I watched that. Now that one was a 96 episode anime, and maybe with the exception of one or two, voice actors in that, the whole cast. Because what ended up happening is, I guess, for a while there, the first half of the series wasn't quite as popular,
Mhm.
so they had this long break, and then they, so I think Ellen Kennedy, I think was one of the two or three, Ellen Kennedy and Yanis Yad, probably the two who kind of were there for the entire series. Everybody else was changed over. So,
Mhm.
so
And
Ellen Kennedy,
Rumiko Takahashi did such like a productive person because the manga for both My Son Koku and Urusei Yatsura were running on and off at the same time as each other, right? For most of the 80s, one starting My Son, I believe, in 80 itself, and that one was more on and off Urusei Yatsura all the way from 81 to 87. Both of them ended in 87, which is also when Ranma One Half started.
yeah. Well, I think as I understand it, the anime the anime for My Son and Koku originally came out in '86.
Mhm.
If I remember
It was
correctly, from
pretty
what
late into the run.
Yeah. So, anyways, getting back
Because
to
of
the
that, there wasn't a lot of filler because the show was or the manga was pretty much already over by the time the show started.
hmm, yeah, and we're at the hour mark here, so
Mhm.
there's gonna be one of those shows where we're gonna go a little over, but let's see, yeah, okay, so a lot of strong material here to get into conversation, eh?
Mhm.
Uh, all right,
That happens to
so
be something I do know a lot about.
yeah. So now we're back to Avi speaking here. So, well, if anything, like I said, I thought most Japanimators um, wanted to prove the medium's worth, employment for exploiting or exploring mature issues just as much as live action. All that aside, did this really need to be remade? I'm certainly not surprised a woke channel like Netflix would seek to broadcast a concept like Ranma One Half, and they quite possibly did it just so they could have something that pander to an LGBT segment. Now, yeah, I also don't like the idea of a lot of these remakes. I've watched a lot of the more, like I've watched, I've watched my fair
Yeah.
share of anime. I've Yu Yu Hakusho, Inuyasha, you know, I've watched like the original Cowboy Bebop and all that, and and I do actually want to see. I would love to see the English dub of the '80s Urusei Yatsura. Um,
That is really, really hard to find.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the disappointing thing about it. It's like I think on YouTube they do have some clips of the first episode, the dubbed first episode, but other than that, you can't. It's really, as you said, it's really hard to find, and I'm kind of disappointed because, like, now for me, it's not as much because of Urusei, not because of as much Rumiko Takahashi or any connections to her
Yeah.
work, but the reason I wanted to see because it was the anime was originally done by Studio Pero,
Yeah.
which of course gave us Yu Hakusho, Bleach, Naruto, some of my other favorites.
Yeah, for better or worse.
Uh,
Because you've
I
heard my problems with Pierrot and
actually no,
what's
I
it called?
haven't.
And Bleach before.
I don't think I have.
We've talked about this actually.
Uh,
I've brought it up, and it's because they actually changed a lot of the connection between Orihime and Ichigo early
okay,
on
yeah,
in her origin because they were trying to push Ichigo and Rukia as a ship, hoping that actually change Tite Kubo's direction there.
uh, so in the original manga, they actually were having Ichigo and Orihime as more the romantic couple as opposed to
It was something that was
Ichigo.
building up because she was like the girl next door kind of like childhood best friend character. Like Ichigo and Urahime knew each other their entire childhood. But
Right.
they kind of like gloss over that in the adaptation and try to make them seem a little bit more estranged from
Mhm.
each other to be able to push Rukia more as the love interest. Because the idea is like if you could change the fans' opinions, you might be able to change the author's opinion if it's a work that's still in progress.
Hail. So Elk is here, parasocial audience. Hail, Metal, and Mike. Nice to see your mug in person. I don't know which. I don't know which. Oh, I guess he's talking about you.
Oh, I'm normally not on camera when I hop on here. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, but yeah. All right. I do remember now you mentioning that. Now that you
But
uh,
I did want to address something in the article here. Where you say not surprised that woke channel like Netflix would seek to broadcast this. I actually don't even think there are quote unquote woke drivers behind adapting Ranma, even for Netflix. Though there might be a little bit of the localizer doing some things here and there. I have a few criticisms that it might get worse later on, but we don't have to get into that. It's been mostly fine actually. Marsupial and I have been watching the remake every single day week that it comes out, but The driving factor is that there was the Urusei Yatsura remake on an anniversary, extremely popular, and for years, people who do like Ranma, Japan, or even the people over here, the few of us that there are, have been asking for a remake of Ranma, like actively, because the original show, starting with season 2, the further you get in, more and more, was like 47% filler, like just episodes that were made up by Studio Dean to fill in the gap because the manga was still running. And then that version doesn't even come to the end of the story. It goes like 2/3 into the whole thing, ends, and that's it. Right. So if you're like, we've been wanting a remake that's true to the manga, we've been wanting it full, and that conversation comes back up again, and they're like, after Urusei Yatsura, David Productions, which are the ones who did that remake, should totally do a Ranma remake. Like it's time for that. It's the next story after Urusei Yatsura,
Oh,
and then you
I
have like
know.
Mappa and Netflix come up.
You're talking about when they decide to do a remake because now that the source material is complete. Now let's see what happens when you just put it all together in one fell swoop, as opposed to
Yeah, no
choppy,
filler, just nothing.
choppy,
Just
here.
yeah, every chapter, just go.
Yeah. I mean, I know they did. Now, granted, that I know that's not a Rumiko Takahashi, work, but I know that's kind of what happened with Hunter x Hunter too. Like I've seen
Yeah,
both. I've seen the one from '99, and that one's pretty good. I like that one. And then, we see later the 2011 one. The only thing I'm disappointed in with the only thing that disappoints me about the 2011 Hunter x Hunter
yeah,
is that they didn't bring back the Blue Water crew to do the voices.
yeah, okay.
That was the only disappointing factor for me. Not that the LA crew is a bad crew or anything like that, but I would have still loved to see like the Blue Water crew, the Calgary crew, get a shot at that. Now maybe they did for the Canadian audiences. I don't know, but like hearing Caroline Day again as Menchie, that would have been pretty cool.
Well, I was hoping for that with Ranma as well to some degree. Some of them, just because I'm so attached to the old voices, and in the Japanese dub, all of the ones who are like still alive, it is the original voices. But the American one with Netflix doing the dub, it's not. Really, the only one that I cared about,
Primarily the
I
LA
just
voice actors and the newer ones
yeah,
at that.
I wanted Cox to reprise his role. That's really what I wanted. But the new ones are good. They chose people who actually sound closer to the Japanese voices than the original time around. They match like the tenor and tonality of the characters a lot closer. In fact, Genma's voiced by Fred Tatasciore.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. So let's continue on with the article here. For all I know, I may end up going 2 hours with it because of how long this article was.
Well, you can cut me off at any time.
Huh?
I mean, you can feel free to cut me off at any time if I start rambling.
No, that okay. Well, I mean, I want your input. So, um, so let me see where we're. Oh yeah, okay. Oddly enough, muted nudity may not be that new. That new. In the 1970s, I think there were some TV-based anime where nipples were not seen on naked breast. However, I vaguely recall seeing 2 or 3 series, in parentheses here, Galaxy Express 999 and Candy Candy. And it's kind of funny because right before my show, as a
Yeah.
way to kill time, I happened upon a YouTube video where they had like the top anime opening from like 1975 to 2024, and Candy Candy was one of those.
Mm.
So, where frontal male nudity was seen on youngsters, and if that's what they thought acceptable, um, then it speaks volumes of hypocrisy for the times.
Oh, well, think of Dragon Ball, right? Kid Goku would walk around naked early on in the story. even taking a pee in the pond, and even like Bulma takes a bath and stuff. Like this was not uncommon, even under children's shows, if you would say for children. Um, the thing with Rama though is a lot of people actually suspect that the Blu-ray release of this show will probably add the nipples back, especially because like I've noticed that in some shots the shape of the breasts still have the point of the nipple in there. It's just the nipple's gone. And this is something that happened in some older series where like the TV broadcast would still show nudity, but there wouldn't be any nipples or anything. And they actually did that on a separate cell. So there's like a separate cut of it that would then be released for like the VHS and or DVD
Yeah,
release.
and since the
I think that might
VHS
happen here.
right, which since the VHS was more for persons, so they didn't have the same restrictions
Restrictions
they
that
did when they
broadcast.
showed it on
Yeah.
when they broadcasted. Yeah,
Because like
I
the
think
whole idea is that children
I
might turn this on by accident, you know?
yeah. I mean, I've seen all the Dragon Ball series, and I think I do distinctly remember seeing in the first Dragon Ball series, seeing Goku running around naked, and you could actually see his little
Yeah, like the
thing,
little shape of it, yeah.
you know.
And one of the reasons Netflix doesn't have it, though, might be because this is done in partnership with Netflix Japan specifically. And in Japan, they treat streaming services exactly the same as they do broadcast TV. So, whatever restrictions that it would have had for the broadcast TV, they also have that restriction on the streaming service.
And let's see, Elk has something to say here. Let's see what he has to say. Dear Lord, except for the Muslim world, America is its own league for narrow-minded attitudes towards nudity, and it has even gotten worse, more whack, to do neo-prudish since the 2000s.
Yeah, so it almost seemed like we were loosening up, and then it swung back around the other way.
Yeah.
And again, like I said before in my comment before I came on, a lot of even the tightening up on Japanese broadcasts might be influenced from us over here in the West as well.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. And if you heard me in response to when you said that, too, I know Yellow Flash himself had talked about that a while back, where and it's happening with a lot of Sony stuff, right? Where I guess there are some of the companies that they're working with here in the state some of the American companies are trying to get on the boards there so they can further censor it and all that.
Yeah.
So anyways, let's see. So these examples may be few and far between, but IIRC, the anime of Konjiki no Gash, if I understand correctly, that's Zatch. Well, the anime we know as Zatch Bell, if I remember correctly.
Is it? Because if so, yeah, I remember there being like mild nudity in that one.
Yeah,
Let
it featured a sick joke with male nudity too in its premiere.
Yeah, that is Atchbell.
Yeah, nearly 2 decades ago. That's why more astute observers have lamented how Japan unfortunately embarrassed animation as much as they made it more sophisticated. Now, here's another comment. So I guess now we're back to the article he's referencing here. Nudity fades away in the actual manga over time, but the last chapter has a boob shot of a kan. I guess it's supposed to be a kane, not a kana.
That's supposed to be a kane, yeah.
And the first half of Inuyasha also included nudity to keep the boys engaged for Takahashi, basically up on that for good. So it's all a bit complicated. Anyway, if the show featured nudity, and it is sexual in the end, as a core feature, then it would get TVMA or high teen ratings, all over the world, and the anime wouldn't even be able to air on most Japanese stations, even at night. Add the 16-year-old characters, and you are only looking at trouble in the end. Can't wait till the U.S. culture war fully discovers any manga. This is supposed to be a show for teens, so the barbification was a foregone. I think they meant conclusion.
A foregone concussion
Somebody's
just
having
sounds
editing
so much better,
problem
though.
the other day. Foregone concussion. I think they
A
meant
foregone
conclusion.
concussion sounds like somebody punched you in the head and you deserved it.
Even 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
The Inuyasha anime had no nudity either. For example, why was nudity removed from adult-rated seinen shows like Vinland Saga and Parasite in 2014? Same reason as here. Not worth the hassle for the producers, so 17 plus Netflix shows and uncensored releases of softcore porn are the exclusive domain of anime nudity now. But
Well, also, let me correct this. Inuyasha had no full frontal nudity. Inuyasha did have obscured nudity. There was, like I said, there was times where Kagome was in the bath,
Mhm.
not just at home, but also in hot springs and stuff.
Right.
Like there was obscured nudity in Inuyasha. I believe in the manga it was a little less obscured, but it was still just as frequent. It was just the direction of the animation to decide to only have the obscured part.
Right. Well, and the funny thing is too about and I mentioned this earlier too, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard me when I talked about this earlier, but in a lot of the rom com and a lot of the slice of life animes, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in some like where some like Inuyasha, where you do have a group, a mixed gender group, of guys and girls traveling together, particularly in the more the slice of life and rom com stuff, you do have specific episodes where the characters either all go to the beach, or go to a hot spring, and it's like that's where you see more of the quote unquote fan service, right? You do see more.
Sometimes.
And,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen a number of and there are a lot of animes out there with this where you have the whole group sitting in a hot spring together. You know,
Oh yeah, like there is the stereotypical the beach episode, which happens quite a bit.
mhm,
Um, Onsen are just also just a very important part of Japanese culture and life. So hot springs and bathhouses and stuff are very common in their different stories because it is just a cultural feature.
mhm. Well, even think about the like. Well, okay, another example of a pretty interesting situation. Another kind of rom com type anime that I was really into, and I probably talked to you about this before. It was Midori Days,
Hmm.
right? That's the one where one morning the tough guy finds the girl who likes him has become his right hand. You know, and of course they had a scene in there where they're in a mixed bath together with, of course, with his sister there as well, his older sister there as well. So I don't know if you've ever seen Midori Days, but it's a pretty funny show. um,
Yeah. I've seen a little bit of it, but I haven't watched it all the way through.
yeah. Anyways, the brief nudity in the original Urusei Yatsura anime was controversial in the 80s, but it wasn't the first TV anime with boob shots. Lupin Part 1 is an early example from 1971. Even Gundam, the last Gundam product with nudity, was the very beginning of Turn A in 1999. And Urusei Yatsura's readaptation was also nudity free. The global
Like I
market.
said, it
uh,
depends what you define as nudity. There is obscured nudity in the readaptation.
mhm,
There's just not full frontal. And to be fair, having read a lot of this manga, While Takahashi has no problem at all drawing full frontal nudity in her work, they don't linger on it very long. So it is up to the adaptation's discretion on the frame that they're using, right? So like sometimes there's an episode where Ranma's just like nude through the whole episode, like the bathhouse battle, but then there's like, oh, maybe Ranma or Akane are nude for 1 or 2 panels in this chapter. How
Yeah.
long are you actually going to linger on that as a cameraman in the animation, right?
Yeah. Based on what you're saying about Takahashi too, it's like it would seem that she's more when she does write these stories, right? She's trying to present nudity as just kind of a natural, normal thing, you
Yeah, like
know.
a thing that happens, even though everybody else is still prudish about it. Like they have natural reactions to, say, like a girl is in the bath and a boy sees her nude, right? Or something would happen is like Ranma has to go take a hot bath to change back, right?
Right.
And um, maybe I don't know, Moose or Ryoga is in the bath with him for some reason. Nakane is like, Ranma, Ranma, I figured something out. She comes running in and they're excited and they stand up and now there's like 2 naked boys in front of her and like she immediately gets flustered and hits them back into the bathtub because
Yeah. All right. So continuing. How have you liked the show here tonight?
I always have fun talking about Ranma and just Takahashi in general. I would say that Rumiko Takahashi is by far my favorite story creator. Just period. If like I had to pick somebody who's my favorite, it would be her. Favorite comic creator. She's not an animator herself, but has a lot of animations based off her stuff. Just favorite fictionologist.
Well, I would say that there's a number of her works that have gotten my attention over the years too. Inuyasha, Maizanikoku, Yurusei Yatsura. Again, I would love to be able to watch the original dub of that, but as you put it, you know, kind of hard to find.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, back to the global market and Japan becoming more buttoned up killed the money shot. Um, No magical Blu-rays are bringing it back, especially if we consider that even Japan is giving up on disc these days. It's Netflix or nothing, and Netflix is. Sounds like they're saying that Netflix is becoming a monopoly.
Possibly. I mean, there are other alternatives. Depending on especially production companies. Like if you want something from Sentai Works, I think they have a partnership with High Dive, so it's
Yeah.
probably going to be on there specifically. There are other streaming services, but there's still a lot of Blu-rays coming out, at least right now. They may start fading away, but even Netflix has put out some Blu-ray versions of their original series. So I don't think Netflix has uncensored anything, but most of their original series aren't even censored on their own platform. So it's
Right.
just like, hey, if you want to give Netflix money and own a copy that they can't take away from you.
Okay. PAL versions of video games. Okay. Now, before I continue reading, I know you're kind of more of a video game expert than I am. What exactly is a PAL version of a video game?
Oh, so that's a regional thing, right? So games used to be, in some cases, they still are region locked. So if you have like a North American PlayStation, it won't read Japanese discs or something like that, right? Like,
Hmm.
and you have different regions. You have like NTSC, PAL, or PAL, and the PAL is usually the European market region, if I recall.
All right. So PAL versions of the video game used to have a similar problem back in the day. The anti-gore and Nazi imagery German market sometimes led to full EU releases being censored. The German market was too lucrative to skip, and only making one version saved money and time in too many cases. Quote unquote. Both problems solved themselves in the end. Streamers couldn't be more cheap these days, so they won't waste money on alternative scenes being made, especially if they don't even get to stream that version. They can't even pay real humans to make subs anymore. And what is cheaper than that?
Well, this is why again, I still have hope. I don't think it'll be like alternative camera shots or anything. The only thing that I think will end up happening is maybe in the Blu-ray version they'll end up drawing the nipples back in. But it's not just Netflix Japan, and I want to be specific. It is a partnership with Netflix Japan, which is a division in Japan that runs things slightly differently. But it's also done with Nippon TV and Studio Mappa is the or Mappa Productions is the studio doing it. Uh, yeah, I think there will be a Blu-ray release of this, and I would bet money that they'll probably have the nipples back in that version.
Hmm. All right. So,
But all the camera shots will be exactly the same.
all right. So, anyway, came back there, and I think we're getting back to Avi speaking here. So, from the looks of it, let me see. Yeah, I think it is Avi speaking now. Regarding Urusei Yatsura, I have seen the original franchise from 1981 to 91, parentheses here, along with another special produced in 2008, parentheses, in past years. And while I can't recall if there was outright nudity in that, there were two episodes set at a bathhouse. I recently got to see the remake as well, which even remakes at least one OVA, in parentheses here, the story that's a variation on Alice in Wonderland with bunny suits, parentheses, and some of quote unquote the final chapter film from 1988 to serve as a finale. But it's worth noting that maybe less than half of what the original consisted of was bound to have been remade, um, even if um, some of the newer takes um, episodes were split between two stories condensed into shorter format. From what I can tell, David Productions remade what were considered the most popular stories from the original run, produced by Studio Pero, Dean/Dean. I've also seen the adaptation of Takahashi's Maizani Koku and thought it even more engaging, which is why I hope it's not remade as the other two adaptations have been to date, because the original from the late 80s reflected the time it was made. I guess he's talking about the Maizani Koku one, I guess.
Yeah, which is honestly probably the most tame story that Rumiko Takahashi has ever written. One of the things I wanted to say about that too is we knew going in that Urusei Yatsura was only going to be depicting the most popular chapters from the manga. Colloquially, it was even called Urusei Yatsura All Stars.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that like people who follow knew what it was going to be going in, and a lot of people thought it was going to be a full remake of the whole series, and that was never going to be the case. Ranma, on the other hand, they are marketing it as multiple seasons, not just like this 2-season first half, second half thing. Ranma looks like it's probably going to be a full remake of the whole story.
All right. And worked well within those boundaries. Also, the animation from the time holds up very well too. There's no need to keep doing all these remakes just so a bunch of hypocrites who may not hold similar standards when it comes to violent content can have something to serve their own questionable agenda. Let's take a look at another comment.
Well, before we do, I do want to reiterate that there was an actual demand for a remake of Ranma. It wasn't like, oh, we're just doing this to harp on like or like get money from an IP that was already successful. The audience wanted a remake because the original was about half filler and never finished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
But also, you could read this. I'm gonna go use the restroom real quick.
All right. All right. Well, hopefully. Well, all right. So, anyways, um, yeah, I just since we're having a running commentary. Let me just see how much more because this is quite a. Yeah, I know. I knew when I started this, this was going to be quite a. Look at all that material there we got going tonight. Quite a lengthy, quite a lengthy one. I knew it was lengthy when I looked into it, but wow, it's even lengthier than you know. Um, but there's a lot of good material here that spark, you know, um, discussions and all that. So, all right, let me just see. Yeah. So, anyways, let's see. Uh, um, uh, while you were gone, I just took a quick peek to see just how much more there is. There's quite a bit more.
Yeah, I could tell just from looking at the scroll bar.
All right. So, um, anyway, so I have a theory that the subtle distinction between sexual nudity and non-sexual nudity is lost on more people these days. In the old series and manga, I think Ranma's nudity was akin to nude portraits and anime art included simply because it was a natural component of the female form. Or maybe it's just me because I never got a sexual thrill out of seeing Ranma's female form.
I think that's mostly true because Rumiko Takahashi just likes drawing women.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I think Haposai um, is the character who primarily makes the display of sexual characteristics in Ranma One Half problematic. Even he was less interested in the female form than than the underclothes covering it. Let's see. And then Avi speaks here. That certainly sums up how I would feel if I ever do watch Ranma One Half. Again, how can I find this appealing when the protagonist is actually a man undergoing major spells, now another? It's funny that even a Netflix anime like Bastard has nippleless bare breast, even though um, even though it's rated 18 plus for violence, nudity, and sex. Um, I get that the rating is mostly for the violence and the IIRC. The what is IIRC?
If I recall correctly, or
Okay,
if I remember correctly, either of those two.
all right. The manga didn't show nipples either. My
That's
preference
true.
is. Go ahead.
Bastard was a shonen manga that was very borderline. It was like almost seinen if you read it, but it was in a shonen magazine, and a lot of it was meta humor that was making fun of other shonen of the time. But it was a shonen dark fantasy, and they did not show nipples in the manga.
Well, I know. If you go back to like 97, 98, around there was an anime that came out. And then, of course, I've seen it. I've seen the English version, which was done by Central Park Media, I believe, or
Yeah,
NYAB Coach, one of those two. Berserk,
yeah.
Berserk, Guts and Griffin, and that one was pretty. That one is definitely not kid friendly.
Oh no, that's seinen. Um, but in the same respect, there was also Fist of the North Star, right?
Mhm.
Hokuto no Ken, and that's a shonen that was already kind of pushing the bounds of the edge when it came out, mostly due to violence. and gore to a degree because there's like people literally exploding. But Bastard even included sex in the manga, but you never saw it, right? You'd see all this stuff leading right up to it, but then it would be off panel.
Right. So my preference is that if you won't show nipples, be a little more creative with blocking instead of giving us Barbie doll anatomy.
Well, that's kind of what they're doing to a degree, right? Like they're just not showing the area for the most part, but there's a lot of scenes in Ranma where you can't avoid it, right? Like you actually just need the full body. And I would rather have this like plastic doll nudity than the scene not playing out. Like that's my personal preference.
Yeah. Aren't you glad I brought this article to your attention?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff that I've already talked about specifically before too. Like Marsupio and I talked about it on our show, and I've been going off on it because a lot of the people who talk about this just aren't as involved in it as I am, I guess.
Well, I just happened upon the article today, looking for stuff to of course, profile or go over. And
Yeah.
I knew this one was going to take a good chunk of the show. It's not only that, it's taking even more. So. But that's okay because you know me. I'm always looking for ways to get conversations going and to get stuff out there. So, anyways, back to the article. What raises eyebrows here, and this is obvious speaking again. What raises eyebrows here is the part about violence. But valid questions can also be raised as to why all the worry about a cartoon. If live action films, by contrast, have nudity unrestricted, even with body doubles in place. Next, now before I get into the next comment here, cartoons and anime are distinctly different.
Yes, mostly, right? Because there are cartoon anime, right? Anime just means animation. So not all animations are cartoons, but well, actually not all our cartoons are animation. You could political cartoons a comic. But there's a specificity to cartooning, and there are Japanese cartoons as well, like Crayon Shinchan.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. So, what an incredibly strange way to answer questions. It's almost condescending. Plus, how can one say that it wasn't censored and then literally say in the next couple of sentences how much the fan service elements were in the original manga and anime, therefore making it censored? It is a real shame that they had to with such an incredibly hard cut to the point that a butt crack can't even be drawn. That's either laziness or a level of censorship beyond what even Disney would do nowadays. Heck, just use the standard magical light beams or steam. At that point, at least, it looked better than that. I'm really
Oh, yeah, and then you
curious.
have the other side where people complain about how the magical light beams look stupid.
Mhm. Um, I'm really curious about how they are going to factor in various story elements going forward. This way, if that's the case, because Haposai um, is going to either have to be removed completely or fundamentally changed. Plus, if I remember correctly, didn't Ranma end up flashing an opponent accidentally or on purpose a few times? Any?
Accidentally, yes.
Huh?
Ranma did use girlish charms to distract a lot of people, but he really didn't like necessarily opponents seeing his breast or her breasts at the time. In most situations, there was a lot of accidental flashing that was in his advantage.
Hmm. That's in this obvious beginning again. I think there's valid grounds on which to reprimand the columnist for talking down to the readership to the point where he almost makes it sound like manga is literally a children's medium in almost every sense, which contradicts how past mangakas and animators tried to prove it worthy for adult subjects, as noted before. Seriously, does ANN, Anime News Network, really want to employ somebody that unintelligible? That said, if you want something else, eyebrow raising. So now we know that that Anime News Network has been kind of going the woke route in recent years.
I mean, they've always been kind of stupid. I'll be real. ANN has even before they started getting like really progressive, they've always been kind of stupid.
Hmm. Well, I know that Hiro Hay has had a few choice analysis for them as well. You know, going back to the whole Vic stuff and all that.
Yeah.
Um, so censorship is pretty common in most anime adaptations for manga, as manga are allowed to show more things than TV networks can. It's nothing new, especially for shonen anime, which tend to get the worst of it, which also includes violence and blood. Fairy Tail's anime adaptation was pretty infamous for the complete lack of blood um, in it compared to other shonen anime and the original manga. Speaking of which, the nudity and sexual humor is not the only thing they changed.
Now here's some stuff that I probably actually can agree with here.
Hmm. Was that all you were saying on it? Is that some stuff you can actually agree with?
No, the stuff that's coming up. I said I do actually have some nitpicks about this adaptation so far. It just hasn't really been any of the stuff that people have been complaining about before this.
Hmm. All right. Let's see. I noticed they also removed the word China from Ranma's overalls and changed it to smile. Also, the red communist star on Ranma's hat um, in one scene was removed. A lot of references to China seem to be cut from the reboot. I don't know if it's due to xenophobia on the Japanese side or the Chinese market asking them to remove it. Chinese stuff seems to get altered a lot in Japanese media these days, especially re releases of older series and video games. As Japanese media became more global, they had to censor things to not offend other countries. Perhaps the nudity was in the same category, as a lot of countries would not allow it, especially the label drawings of naked minors um, as child pornography.
Yeah. So here's the thing too. One of the things I've liked so much about this adaptation is just how close it's been to the manga in many ways,
Mm,
compared to the original. Like the original, they would pick a couple outfits, and Ranma would just always wear those outfits, depending what the animation team decided that day. In this one, every character wears exactly what they wore in the panel that the shot was based off of, including, as I mentioned, there's an overall combination that Ranma wears that says China on it. Now it's actually Akane's overalls. So that was always the funny thing. It's like, wait, why does Akane have a pair of overalls that say China? Ranma was the one who's been to China, and usually all of his outfits are Chinese. It's just like a little funny thing. And part of that is actually because the one of the big influences on this series was Hong Kong action comedies, like the stuff that Jackie Chan did back in the day,
mm,
right? That's even the beats, the tempo for the comedy is very similar to Hong Kong action comedies, just
mm,
with the catch that people sometimes transform when water splash on them. Um, so you'll have like the outfits look a lot closer, but then they're further away in other ways because they like, oh no, we can't have the word China on there for some reason, even though China's heavily involved in the story. We'll put the word smile there instead.
mm. Yeah, all right. So getting back to the article here. Wow. If this was done not to offend China, that actually figures. What with the way they do things according to communism for many years now. And reacting to the communist third point, this in particular and we're back to the article, of course. This in particular just seems like a weird take to me. Um, is it really a concern that the lady folk might be so offended by the sight of a cartoon nipple in a bath scene that they'd immediately drop the series and run screaming from the room, never to watch anime again? Do you really think female viewers would be generally offended at the sight of a butt crack? Again, I would say in context there, right? Like in a bath scene like that, if you really think that people would react that strongly to such a scene, that's kind of stupid, quite honestly. What do you think?
It's well, even here, it's typically parents specifically that get affected by that. Not even all parents, but right, it's like female viewers. No, typically it's going to be somebody who isn't actually a viewer. It's going to be like the mother of a viewer or someone, right? Um, and it's usually when parents react that way, they don't even know the context. They don't care about the context. They walk in and they see something like that, and like, hey, you shouldn't be watching this.
Yeah.
And that's usually where like a lot of those like campaigns would start back in the day. It's like, look at what my kid is watching. And it's like, you don't even know what your kid's watching. Did you watch more than a minute of it?
And as Avi said, I agree with this. It feels like it's talking down to women or even upholding a regressive idea that women would find attractive women offensive. Um, watch any major woman VTuber that plays any of the major fanservice gotcha games, um, and how they thirst over them. I don't even I don't think even relatively non-sexualized nudity like in Ranma One Half bathing scenes would be offensive to women, especially teens and adults.
Yeah, no. I mean, I watch a lot of those VTubers because they end up playing a lot of the same gotcha games that I play. I play most of those gotcha games, but even extending it, right? So the people who aren't parents that complain over this, like those activists, are people who won't have kids of themselves, so they try to act like parents to everyone else around them, right?
Yeah. Which I would be surprised they don't
Yeah.
find they get a fist to the face on a few occasions.
Well, most of them are behind a keyboard, so they never even get close enough to somebody to give them a fist to the face.
Uh, if they're used to seeing live action nudity in a movie or even cable TV, then animated nudity is not going to worry them by a long shot. Also, if there happens to be an R rating, doesn't that prepare the viewer for what to expect? That they know the given rating. Now, here's one more comment that could be worth pondering. While I find the omission of female nipples in Ranma to be a thing that's par for the course for most TV anime targeted to a broad age group nowadays, the crack being filled in, so to speak, in parentheses laughing, is a trend I've noticed across gender lines um, in anime for a bit now. Um, and while I quote unquote understand the nipples being omitted, the solid butt epidemic is what I just cannot wrap my head around. Well, yeah, well,
I agree more with this one than the nipple part. It's like, yes, no. If your butt just looks like one solid mass, we don't see the cheeks. It looks anatomically weird. Like, how do you run like this?
Well, not just that, but
Yeah.
here's something that just crossed my mind too, right? Okay, so if you're closing that crack, right? You're closing the butt crack, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, aren't you putting the anime characters in a very constipated state? I mean, how exactly are they going to uh, poop?
Well, I mean, so what we have to understand too is like technically the crack is still there. We just can't see it. And this is actually the issue, right? That it bothers people because you know it's still there. It has to be there. It's just like when you see female nudity, they're as atomically correct as a Barbie doll. At no point is the genitals ever drawn. You know it's there. There's no need to draw it. But that one's not as awkward though, right?
I mean,
Because it's a
can
more
you just
subtle
imagine?
change
Can you
as opposed
imagine
to like not having the whole split in the butt crack. That's like a
Yeah.
major anatomical difference there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but also, can you just imagine anime where, oh my god, I can't poop, I can't poop, my stomach, it hurts because I can't poop because my butt crack is closed. Oh, boy, that would be one hell of an anime to watch. A bunch of people running around like not being able to poop and their stomach hurting like
Yeah.
crazy. Oh boy.
But I mean, if you look at the other way around, male nipples have almost always just been deleted in most animation in general because there's like no reason to show them, right? So you'll see shirtless guys all the time. You'll draw the pecs, but they'll be barren. There'll be no dot in the middle because like you don't care if you don't see that. That's been like a form of blasé censorship to a degree that's kind of existed in animation forever at this point.
Yeah. But it's like the nipples on a guy aren't really considered like
They're not considered sexual anyway, and yet they still get rid of them. Mostly because the less you have to draw, the quicker you can get the shot done.
right. Yeah, where the chest is just one flat mass. Yeah, so let's see, where were we? Um end of the day, anime is animation. It is created from scratch, visually, meaning animators have the option to not draw the butt at all in the first place and put steam objects and etc in the way, or just choose a cropped framing of any given scene, um, and yet they continue to draw the butts out, but with a missing crack. It's just truly a bizarre production choice because while there could be arguments um, toward a desire for nipless chest, I have never heard of anyone desiring a crackless as an alternative to just hiding the butt in full or displaying a full caboose.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, like, you can't in this case, right? Like early on, sure, you can do shot composition to just not show it, right? Or maybe you can obscure it with other things due to camera angles, what's in the way. But later on, there are entire scenes in the manga itself that take up like the bulk of the chapter you're reading, like Bathhouse Battle, again, as an example,
Mhm.
where Ranma just fighting while nude, right? So it's like you can't just obscure everything and still have full action shots. Like you have to make some compromise here or there.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So, on the opposite gender side of things, the anime that really highlighted the new trend for me was Yuki Bakuhatsu um, Bang Bravern. When it had Isami crouched with no crack in one of the first few episodes, and it took me out of the watching experience because I was confused. If Bravern had sealed him up while he was inside him, and that's why he was so traumatized, because I know I was. Okay, Bravern was an even weirder example because while Ranma is a shonen manga targeting a younger audience, I got the impression Bravern, in parentheses, an original series, was targeted towards older anime and mecha fans. So the need to omit butt crack is again a strange choice since this was one of the few modern anime where male nipples were also present, and it's not like the show wasn't full of sexual innuendos to boot. Like I said in my last paragraph, why did they have to show this unity at all in this case? It's not like there was manga panels.
Yeah.
This was tracing as reference. It was its own thing. I've noticed a general shift over the years away from naked men gags in anime across the board. But why, when there is a but, are we hiding what we all have and all know is there? The posterior is not a secret to literally anyone. And again, if we're worried about people seeing butts, um, I fail to see how a missing crack is a welcome alternative to a scandal free, all ages friendly social media outrage dodging no butt at all. That's
Yeah,
a,
yeah. I have no idea what's going on with that one. I've never seen. I think it's like Bang Brave Bravern is like the English translation of it. Um, but that is an original, as far as I know. There's no manga or anything. It was made originally just for animation. It isn't like this Ranma remake where there are literally you can match up a lot of the shots to panels in the manga. That's how close it's trying to be compared to the previous one. They could take any option in the world with this original anime.
yeah. So at least the Japanese name of it is Yuki Bakuhatsu Bang Bravern. Um, even after reading this, I'm wondering, about just the general intelligence of this particular A&N writer.
Yeah.
Um, no, the whole thing about no butts, though, that actually remind because I don't know if you've ever seen like a certain magical index or a certain scientific ray gun, those series.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen those animes. Well, one of the opening themes to that series, right, to one of the seasons on there, is actually called No Butts. I think they actually spell it Butts. Uh, all right. So interestingly, if so, okay. So this is Avi speaking again, by the way. Interesting. If so, it's probably in contrast to USA live action movies where jokes involving male nudity may still be prevalent. I recently watched Anyone But You, starring Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell, and that he and that and that had a joke scene featuring implied male nudity. It may not have been graphic or explicit, but it was there. Also, note that while it may not have been shy about sex, it did feature one annoying scene featuring LGBT or originating pronoun nonsense on a computer screen, in parentheses here, and the story features a lesbian wedding as a backdrop, um, parentheses. It may be one of the better comedy films of recent, in parentheses again, and the genre has practically been dwarfed by the horror genre, tragically enough. And I don't know if you've been here before when we've covered some of Avi's arguments, but articles. But Avi's not a big horror fan, and he kind of feels that the horror genre is getting too much attention.
Mm, I love horror, but I love most genres in their own respect. So
Yeah. So, but depending how you see things, it still relies on stuff that come to be viewed as in questionable taste. And if the Japanese are moving away from male nudity jokes, that's certainly showing some common sense by contrast. Something to consider is that years before it wasn't considered funny to make jokes out of female nudity in places like a changing room if a man barged in. Um, and that's actually that's common occurrence in many anime, right?
yeah,
Where the guy accidentally walks in on a woman like changing or something like that. That's quite a common occurrence. That's quite a. I mean, I can name a number of anime, including.
well, I mean, in the story at topic, it happens a few times.
Mhm,
Not yet in the remake, but it'll happen later if they actually
mhm.
adapt things the way they're supposed to.
Yeah. Um, in parentheses here, one must wonder if the left still understands this after all the transsexual damage that's come this past decade, on parentheses, and if that's not funny or respectable, then it should be excruciatingly obvious it's not funny to make jokes at men's expense either. So maybe it'd do some good for live action movies and to move away from such crude jokes as well.
Counterpoint: screw everyone. It's funny to make jokes at everyone's expense as long as it's done in good faith.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as you said, as long as it's done good taste, as long as it's not meant to be like demeaning or put people down or anything like that. Not mean
I
stereotypes.
mean, honestly, it could still even be demeaning or to put somebody down as long as they're in on the joke at the same
Right.
time. Because honestly, I'll put myself down, and it's funny, right? So it
Well,
depends. Like,
there is
is
such a
yeah.
thing as self-deprecating humor, right?
Yeah, but it has to be able to apply the other way as long as the other person is in on the joke. Like I could put my really close friends down and they're in on the joke too and they're fine with that, right? Because well they'll put me down too and there's like this cross banter between it.
Hmm. Earlier, there was also a review of this on the Game of Nerds, and the following sounds like an absurd PC pandering. So this is from, I guess, this next article here. Improved representation and censorship. Amongst all the ones mentioned thus far, there were a few changes that were necessary to make. One of the biggest examples is included in the original's first episode, where the unarmed or unnamed Chinese Jusenkyo guide, a tour guide, speaks in a stereotypical accent with broken English. Fans of the show have always recognized this as one of the anime's biggest flaws, as it very clearly misrepresents Chinese individuals. This is especially true um, since later on the stereotype remained consistent with all other Chinese characters um, that show up in the anime,
That's
such
not
as
true.
fan favorite Shampoo and her sisters. Now, before I continue, I need to go off camera here for a quick
Yeah.
moment. But if you want, I have a feeling you have more to say on what I just
Yeah, I
read.
would say that that's not
So,
true.
why don't you go ahead and
Yeah.
talk to the folks about that? I'll be right back.
Yeah, so that is true about specific characters, but there are plenty of people from China in the adaptation that don't speak that way when they come to Japan, and it varies from person to person. Now, Shampoo ends up speaking that way for the entirety of the show, because when Shampoo first shows up, and this will happen in just a couple episodes of the remake, she couldn't speak Japanese at all. She could only speak Chinese, and even Nabiki had to like use a Japanese to Chinese or Chinese to Japanese translation book, like a dictionary, to be able to make out what she was saying anytime that she said anything. Um, and then when she comes back, she has learned some Japanese and she understands that Ranma was fooling her. And then she speaks broken Japanese, or as it appears to be, broken English in the dub. One of the things is there are actually several characters in the manga that, if you look at it from Japanese, are actually speaking kind of a broken Japanese, but that still doesn't apply to everyone. Shampoo's grandmother, Cologne, because she's like 300 years old and has picked up a lot of knowledge throughout her life, speaks flawless Japanese when she shows up to Japan. And even Shampoo's other suitor, the one that she doesn't want, Moose, also speaks flawless Japanese when he shows up to Japan. Both of these characters are from China. And also, Shampoo does have sisters that show up later in the manga, but the two sisters that end up speaking like Shampoo in the original adaptation were not in the manga. They inspired characters that came up in the manga later. Rumiko liked the idea and then made her own characters based off of it. But that was filler episodes made entirely by Studio Dean. So they're the ones that chose that they spoke broken Japanese. I think their Japanese was broken. It wasn't just like the localization from Ocean that chose that when they decided to make those characters in English. Like, I think of the Japanese, and it was also just broken Japanese, not broken English. A lot of the broken English was them localizing broken Japanese. And the only way you know this is if you've seen it enough time in both versions. Now, the Chinese guide, I did think it was kind of weird. It's been a while. I could actually probably pull it up and see, because I have the entire manga on my computer. I think the Jisenkyo guide also spoke broken Japanese in the manga, but he was a guide in China that was showing them. Here, let me go find it real quick.
Yeah.
Chapter
Oh,
1.
yeah, I know. I was just going over to my TV to see what you wrote for your undertitle there.
Oh, yeah.
Rumiko Takahashi expert, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine you'd want to try to invite some of your friends to come over here, since we're basically talking about stuff that you'd be talking about on your show right now anyways.
Well, if they don't show up, they'll probably just, see the VOD or something. Let me look for the guide.
All right. So, anyways, getting back to the article here. So, naturally, everyone was very much.
Yeah, he spoke broken Japanese in the manga as well. It translates to him saying stuff like, "This place very dangerous. Nobody use now." Right? Like, it's not complete grammar. That wasn't something that they just decided to localize. In the Japanese version, the guide speaks broken Japanese. That's something that Rumiko Takahashi did.
Oh, I don't know. How you even started with, because I can see.
Well, yeah, because we were talking about, thankfully, this is what you get when you see the Jisenkyo guide and the remake is stripped of his stereotypical dialect. Yeah, but that's choosing to strip him of that. But in the original version, he spoke like that in the manga. He spoke broken Japanese.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Oh, yeah, that's right. I think I did read. Okay, I read up the same treatment. Fans have been very eager to see ever since hearing about the remake. All right. Aside from that, there was also a lot less nudity shown in the first episode compared to the original, which makes sense for a modern day release. While it showed up a lot more, I personally never thought nudity was a crucial aspect of the original anime. The remake seemed to have found other ways to accomplish what many of those scenes were trying to do without it. So I was left genuinely curious as to why they cut it down to specifically only one scene where Rama is getting ready to take a second bath in his female form instead of just scrapping nudity altogether. It leaves me curious as to how they'll cut them down for future episodes. Let's see. So now back to Avi here. Interesting how the argument here isn't about whether the whole premise was gross to begin with, but rather gross.
Yeah,
The language he's using to choose here is,
very
Granted, I
weighted.
looked him up. He's like supposedly he's 50 years old, but yet he talks like a kid at times.
Oh yeah, like when you said icky earlier.
Yeah, gross, icky. Oh boy. To begin with, but rather whether there should be any nudity at all. This particular item may be written by a woman, but again, it's supremely silly to think all women think like a hive. And if women in the 80s and 90s didn't have an issue with seeing Michelle Pfeiffer doing nude scenes in R rated movies, then it's not like all today are that different. And what's this about Chinese and stereotypical dialect? If this is the English language dubs we're talking about, surely that wouldn't apply to the original Japanese per se. There's something strange about the talk of a need for Chinese inclusivity here, inclusivity too. Um, there's been so there's been only so many items in past decades where Chinese descendants were present. It's not an issue at all, not even for Japan. I get this weird feeling this has something to do with China's communism. Could that be the reason for this silly argument? I may not find the premise of Ranma One Half appealing, but it's certainly telling when somebody blatantly comes out in favor of censorship, as the writer of this insult to the intellect did.
Oh yeah, like I said, because in the manga itself, a lot of the Chinese characters speak broken Japanese, which is kind of like a stereotype in Japan towards Chinese people. Um, but a lot of them do. Honestly, the Jisenkyo guy didn't bother me too much because he's a tour guide. It's like if anybody you were going to change to make sense that he could speak other languages fluently, it would be the guy whose job is to give tours. But if Shampoo leaves at the end of the season and then comes back and she is not speaking broken Japanese or broken English to localize the broken Japanese, like she's supposed to in the manga, I'm probably actually going to stop watching it in English. And Netflix actually has two sets of English subtitles. There is one I found that does match the Japanese text and not just the subtitles for the English version. I'll just watch it that way. Uh, because that's a step too far. It is part of Shampoo's character that she speaks broken Japanese.
Hmm. Yeah, all right. Let's see. The whole subject also led to me to do some research on something I noticed at Niche Gamer more than a year ago about the removal of a lewd scene that was possibly intended as a quote unquote joke in the adaptation of Bleach Thousand Year Blood War. And this is going, I guess, to the Niche Gamer article here. Bleach creator Tite Kubo has expressed dismay over a lewd scene with Orihime getting removed from the Bleach Thousand Year Blood War anime. It is not unusual for certain scenes in a manga to get left out or changed, and Bleach creator Tite Kubo recently explained why the scene with Yoruichi placing her hand between um, Orihime's breast was removed from the anime.
Oh, I didn't even know. So I've been holding off on watching Blood War because I'm just gonna binge it at a certain point. I didn't even know they
Yeah.
removed that scene.
Yeah. Well, I might want to. I might want to. Obviously, since I watched the Bleach anime, I've been a little bit. I've thought about watching that at some point too. But
I was gonna go back and rewatch the original because I've read the whole manga before. I know how the story ends, but it's like, oh man, it's been a long time since I even watched the original like half of the anime that I wanted to like re-catch up before watching the new adaptation of the later half of it, and I just never got around to it. So I didn't know they've been censoring Bleach.
hmm, yeah. Oh, let's see. All right. So let's see. Yeah. Okay. Kubo replied to a fan on their official blog, Club Outside, via Reddit. In parentheses there. The mangaka noted that the anime was airing in a late night time slot, meaning the show could get away with increased violence and gore. Quote, the sequence after Yoroichi's appearance was too lewd, so it was a no-go, unquote. Kubo said, quote, in bracket here, shame as, unbracketed. I really liked the look on Yoroichi's face when she scorns Ichigo. All right. You said you read the manga, right?
Yes,
So
a while ago.
explain to me this scene and why it's controversial.
I'm trying to remember the scene particularly because it's been a long time since I've read it. The
So the
series
scene is
ended
apparently Yoroichi,
quite
I
early.
guess, in her
Yeah.
human form, I guess, placing her hand between um, your Orihime's breast was. I mean, what was that all about in the first place?
I believe, if I recall, she was removing something.
Hmm. Something got caught up in there, and she would just try and
I'm
remove
trying to
it.
remember the exact circumstance. I know the scene, like I remember the manga panel because she's like they're talking about between her breasts. It's like literally, it's like or he has massive breasts. So it's like two round balls there, and her hand is like up in between it, like sticking out by her face. And she's like, now, no need to start crying. I'm just trying to remember what the actual context to the scene was.
Actually, I'm not crying.
Well, you're saying that to Orihime. She was saying like, now, don't start crying.
Oh, okay.
I'm just trying to remember like what preceded that. Well, why was that happening? Because it's been a long time since I've seen it or like read it.
Hmm.
I know Kisuke was there, and so was Ichigo. And this was when Orihime was still wearing the white Arankar outfit.
Hmm. And they said the sequence after Yorichi's and it was too lewd, so it was a no-go. Kubo said, "Shame as I really liked the look on Yorichi when she scorns." Again, what was lewd about it? That's what I don't get.
I mean, there's a lot of lewd stuff in Bleach. Period. Just
Well, anyways,
like the
if
scene
you think
where,
about it,
or
if you think
yeah,
about it, just bring it up. We're gonna move on.
yeah. I'm trying to remember it because like you're talking about lewd scenes too. There's the scene where um, Yoroichi first becomes a woman in front of Ichigo way earlier on was also a pretty lewd scene when he was healing in the hot spring. It's like, well, how did a cat manage to drag me here? It's like, oh no, I was using my human form, and then there's a hot woman in front of him, and no blood shoots out of his nose. Like Bleach is known for having quite a few lewd scenes in it. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So, anyways, the news site later posted screen caps of leftist social media posters who are celebrating this. Now, I don't doubt many of these anonymous creeps were being altruistic, weren't being altruistic, and it wouldn't be the least bit shocking if it turned out they sided with the Islamo-fascists um, who committed the horrors of October 7th, 20. Again, kind of okay. We're going from talking about lewd scenes in anime to terror attacks. Okay, kind of a bit of a stretch there. But what exactly is such a big deal about a scene that plays sexual assault for laughs and shock tactics? Okay, how is, especially with how you were kind of describing the scene, how is that sexual assault? You know.
Well, I mean, that depends how loose your definition of sexual assault is.
Mm,
The fact that without permission, she just like shoves her hand right up in between her breasts. In the West, that would actually qualify as sexual assault.
yeah. Hmm. Yeah. But if she was doing it to try to remove something that that either shouldn't have been there or may have been
No,
feeling
I'm trying to
good.
remember the scene too, because I believe like they were even calling Orihime like a pervert before that. It was a gag. The whole scene was a gag scene,
Hmm.
right? Um, so I think Kisuke like talked her into wearing the outfit.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, anyways, um, in parentheses, I think the character who performs the lewd act is a man, by the way, unparenthesed. I vaguely recall a commenter on Bounding into Comics arguing right wingers have to be careful about defending content like this because it risks giving leftists ammunition to use against conservatives. And while I don't know if Niche Gamer's staff are really conservatives, I do know they shouldn't be letting the politics of certain social media posters cloud their own judgment, moral or otherwise. Seriously, how did I get to a point where lewdness is discussed so casually by these news sites as if it were inherently acceptable in animation in all instances? True, there are Japanese cartoons and manga where sexual violence is depicted negatively, and even if it's committed by villains, um, that doesn't make it instantly acceptable if it's being depicted sensationalistically, simultaneously. Could that be the reason why the posts about the Bleach sequel were erased from the main website in the year since they were written? Is it possible Niche Gamer received complaints from more sensible folks who recognize why it's not healthy to give sex a bad name? In Bleach, I think the one character I would see people really having an issue with is Rangiku right there.
Oh,
You know,
Matsumoto, yeah.
yeah, because she's got those huge breasts. I mean, and I do,
Matsumoto is one of my favorite characters too.
yeah. Oh, I wouldn't mind hanging out. I wouldn't mind hanging out with her. I wouldn't mind hanging out with
Well, it's
her.
not even just her sexual appeal. She has like a really good story arc, especially with like the her history with Geen and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she even there's a part where like her hair's cut shorter too, and she was always trying to keep it long and pretty, but she has to actually cut it short at a different point. Like she actually goes through a lot of development as a character, more so than a lot of the side characters get to go to because in series like this, it's kind of iffy which characters really end up getting development if you're not part of the main like crew.
Yeah, one of the more memorable scenes for me involving Rangiku, I guess there was a one scene where she and I guess she's trying to console Orihime, and they're taking a bath together.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you remember that scene or not.
I remember the scene where she's talking, or Hitsugaya wakes her up because she was drinking and she almost suffocated in her own breasts
Hmm.
because she passed out drunk in them.
Hmm. So I don't know the clear answer to this, but if Japan can think of how to give sex a good name, it could serve as a good defense against moral hypocrites who quite possibly couldn't give a damn, even today, about lewdness in live action, not to mention real life. And it might even restore some esteem to the Japanese public they could be in serious need of too. Um, let's be clear. If gross acts aren't acceptable in USA entertainment, then it's stupid to act as though it's more acceptable in foreign entertainment, animated or live action. So if Japan can persuade anybody dealing with sexual issues to take a better tack, they could have a better advantage that's currently lacking. That's currently lacking. There is all sorts of adult subject matter in Japanese entertainment that's bound to remain for years. And I'd say that's true. I've seen enough harem anime and the like to, yeah, there is a lot of adult subject matter. Some of it quite controversial too, in many respects. But even in the USA, there's plenty of the same. But creatives would do well to consider that by giving sex a bad name, they could doom their creative freedom, and that's why some improvement could be made to the whole approach.
Yeah, I'm laughing about how certain like harem anime and stuff have adult just concepts and topics and humor in it. And like how the heck did Tenchi Muyo ever air on Toonami in the after school block? That still astounds me to this day.
Yeah, well, that one's what that's one of my favorite comedy ones too. That
Oh, I
one's
love
pretty,
Tenchi.
yeah.
It's just the fact that it aired on Toonami after school. Like, how did you get away with this?
Uh, well, because it aired on cable, I think, and at the time they weren't like cracking down on cable as
Yeah,
much.
yeah. You had to have cable to get Cartoon Network.
Yeah. So, with all that told, I'll say again that I don't find Rama One Half's premise appealing, and it's decidedly the kind of fantasy better left in the past. To
Says
remake
you.
it, yeah, to remake it as they have now is silly and insulting, and it wouldn't be surprising if Netflix took up broadcasting rights for the new task out of for the new take out of wokeism. One more reason why it's better not to subscribe to their service.
No, it's not a woke remake. Now there are some things here and there in the localization. You can always complain about localization. That's something even the original studio doesn't have full control over.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have some nitpicks here and there about the localization. I've talked about it on my show. But if you do watch it with the actual English translation of the Japanese and not the full localization, none of that like woke stuff is in there at all. Um, it's just missing a little bit of nudity. And again, that applies to the Japanese audience as well. Like this is made with them in mind. My biggest complaint in the whole series is that Mappa has decided to include this broadcasting club from the school that wasn't in the manga at all as their kind of like little studio insert OC that will sometimes narrate what's going on. That is absolutely unneeded in the show. They've showed up in like 4 episodes now, maybe, and they've bothered me every single time they've showed up.
Yeah. So what did you think of the
Yeah.
article overall?
Um, it was not the worst Avi article that I've been through on this channel.
Hmm.
I've had more complaints about the people that he had complaints with than I did with him this time around.
In other words, the articles that he was covering, like the Anime News Network
Yeah.
article.
Which,
Yeah.
when you pick low hanging fruit like ANN, it's pretty easy to find mutual enemies.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a pretty lengthy. I mean, we're already at the 2.5 hour
Yeah.
mark, so I may be pushing it to 3 hours here, but that's okay because, as I said, um, you know, I would, obviously I'm not broadcasting on Thursday or Friday, so I guess you can say I'm, using up the 2 hours I'd normally use for those tonight, maybe.
Yeah.
But,
Make up
but
time.
yeah, but but that was a pretty good conversation we had about all that. That was, I'm glad was able to get you on to, you know, I mean, you would have
Yeah,
probably
just
I
wish
don't
I
know if
knew
you would
more, remembered that Bleach scene better because it's been a long time since I've read the manga, but I remember it being a gag. Like they literally just removed a joke from it, if that's the scene they removed.
Yeah. So so anyways, well, I don't know if you want to stick around for a little while more. I'm going to move on to the wrestling wrap up here and this day in each history. So I don't know if you want to stick around for that. You can if
No, I think this was the only reason I hopped on. I'll dip out now. You can finish your show off without me. I've got some other stuff I need to start preparing to work on anyway.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining me. I really did appreciate having you on and having your expertise on going over this particular article about about Ron Luana. I knew you'd probably enjoy. I had a feeling you'd enjoy this. Going over this
Yeah.
article simply because it was Ranma One Half. I know you're a big Ranma One Half and a big Rumiko Takahashi fan, so it's good to have you on and get your input and have a good conversation going. But I'll
Yeah,
let you go.
luckily I
I
didn't
know
have
you said
anything
you're
else to do.
busy. Thank you again for joining me,
Yeah.
and I'll see you. Well, actually,
Oh,
one more
what?
thing. Since you did come on, let me at least have you do one more thing or ask you. Would you like to do any kind of before you go? Would you like to do any kind of promo outro before you leave?
I don't really have much other than since our normal schedule is being disrupted, I might do some like gaming streams and stuff throughout the week this week. So it'll still be on the Vomitorium. If people are already subscribed to the Vomitorium, they can just go over there on YouTube and watch it, or the equivalent on Twitch, whichever they prefer. It'll be about the same time block. So like right after your show ends, I'll just hop on and I'll be gaming because I need to catch up on some of the live games that I play on there. I haven't touched them in a while, but it'll be a live stream. So if anybody wants to ask questions or talk about the topics I normally talk on over there, I'll be happy to talk about it while gaming.
Yeah. Well, we'll also probably be interested to see if anybody asks you about about Ranma One Half. You can just you should have came and watched Mike's show because we were talking about that.
I mean, I'll probably point him back over here, but I also can never talk about a series like that I love enough. So I'd probably just reiterate everything anyway.
All right, well, go and have fun with your games and stuff. Thank you again for coming on, and
Yeah.
I do appreciate your input. All right,
Yeah.
see you later, Metal.
Well, I'll still be in the chat. I just got to work on stuff too.
Okay, all right. Well, feel free to contribute then.
Yeah.
If anything grabs your attention, you know the score.
Absolutely. Catch you guys later.
All right. All right. So with that being said, now of course now we're gonna go ahead and move ahead and talk a little bit about. Well, we do have quite a bit, as I said earlier, stuff going on professional, with the wrestling wrap up, as of course, including of course this past weekend, AEW having its Full Gear pay per view this past Saturday. Look at that. Also, this week, the end of this week, Friday, TNA will have its Turning Point pay per view. And then Saturday, WWE has its Survivor Series. So what we're going to do now, we're going to, first off, we're going to go back to Thursday, last Thursday's Impact, to see how they just go over the TNA Impact, Total Nonstop Impact. We're going to start the wrestling wrap up now to talk about what all happened on Impact this last week. All right, so from this past Friday's, so the opening match saw Masha Slamovich retain the TNA Knockouts World Title over the System's Alicia Edwards in a no disqualification match, in a match that was set up with the winner, of course, defending the title against Jordan Grace, who will be enacting her championship rematch clause come this Friday. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes here. Also, in a further continuance of the feud between the team of By Elegance and Spitfire, Ash by Elegance defeated Jody Threat in a one-on-one match. In a match that could be potentially set up a chance for Ash and Heather by Elegance to get a shot at the TNA Knockouts tag team titles over on Spitfire of Jody Threat and Danny Luna. Frankie Kazarian continued building his momentum as he defeated Rhino, the recent Hall of Famer. In X Division tag action, Laredo Kid and Leon Slater defeated the System's Moose and JDC. Moose, of course, recently winning the X Division title over Mike Bailey. Savannah Evans defeated Brittany Jade in a singles match. And in the main event, on a six-man tag match, the team of Hammer Stone, Trent Seven, and Jake Sumner defeat TNA World Tag Champions, the Hardys, and Ace Austin in the main event. So this Thursday, of course, TNA's Impact will have kind of a best of episode, or we'll have, instead of having kind of a regular show, they're going to have matches never seen before, previously recorded on other programs but not seen before, which will lead into, of course, Friday's Turning Point event. And on this show, on Friday, at Turning Point this coming Friday, here's the card as it stands now. Frankie Kazarian will be taking on Mike Santana, a match that was set up on last week's Impact, when Mike Santana came out to lay a challenge out to TNA World Champion Nick Nemeth. Then Kazarian came out to confront him, only for Kazarian's match with Rhino to start. Moose defends the X Division title against Laredo Kid. In a six-man tag match, the Hardys and Ace Austin will be taking on the Rascals and Kushida in a six-man tag war. In a no disqualification match, Josh Alexander and Steve Macklin go one-on-one. In what is now being set up as a 2 out of 3 falls match, Masha Slamovich will be defending the Knockout the World title against Jordan Grace, as Jordan Grace exercises her automatic rematch clause. In a Thanksgiving Turkey Bowl match, PCO, the participants in the Thanksgiving Turkey Bowl match, in which the loser will have to be dressed in a turkey suit. Digital media champion and international champion PCO takes on Eric Young. They also take on Brian Young of the System, John Schuyler of the Good Hands, Hammerstone, and Joe Hendry. And in the match for the TNA World Title, Nick Nemeth defends against the System's Eddie Edwards. So there we go with all the TNA news. Now moving on to AEW, as now we go back to last Saturday's Full Gear event. On this past Saturday's Full Gear pay-per-view from let I find it. So on the 0 hour on the 0 hour preview show, um, Anna Jay defeated Diana Perrazzo in the opening women's match. In a four-way match, Buddy Matthews of the House of Black defeated Dante Martin of Top Flight, Commander, and the Beast Mortos. The main event of the pre-show saw Big Boom AJ defeat QT Marshall. Marshall makes his return to, or QT Marshall makes his return to AEW. And then on the main show itself, the opening match saw in a four-way match for the AEW World Tag Titles. Private Party retained over the teams of Private Party of Quen and Zay retained over Kings of the Black Throne of Malachi Black and Brody King. The Outrunner, the Acclaimed of Anthony Bowens and Max Caster, and the Outrunners of Turbo Floyd and Truth Magnum. MJF defeated Roderick Strong. Mercedes Moné retained the TBS title over Chris Statlander. Jay White defeated Adam Page. Kyle Fletcher, in continued push for him, got the win over Will Ospreay. In the lone title change of the night, Daniel Garcia defeated Jack Perry to become the new TNT champion. Konosuke Takeshita successfully defended the international title over Ricochet. Bobby Lashley, in his first major match for AEW, defeated Swerve Strickland. And the main event saw Jon Moxley retain the AEW World title over Orange Cassidy, which, of course, will lead into this Wednesday's Dynamite, which we will look at here in a moment. Coming up on this Wednesday's Dynamite, as soon as I get there. The Thanksgiving Eve edition of Dynamite here coming up this Wednesday. Already signed for the match, Chris Jericho will be defending the Ring of Honor World title over the Stone Pitbull Tomohiro Ishii. Now, with that being said, of course, now we're going to look at what to look forward to tonight on tonight's WWE Monday Night Raw, as this will be tonight's episode will be the Go Home Raw before this Saturday's Survivor Series match. So, as the WWE makes its last pitch for everybody to get the Survivor Series pay-per-view this Saturday, on tonight's Monday Night Raw, in a non-title War Games Advantage match, Nia Jax will be taking on Bianca Belair. So Nia Jax is the current WWE Women's Champion. What this match, I believe, is it's setting up for the Women's War Games match at Survivor Series. The winner of this match will get the advantage for their respective teams. We'll look at that in a moment. And a tag team match, the New Day, as part of their celebration of Kofi Kingston and their anniversary, and Xavier Woods will be taking on Alpha Academy of Akira Tozawa and Otis. And tonight's Monday Night Raw, of course, will be coming from the Desert Diamond Arena in Glendale, Arizona. And then coming up this Saturday, coming up this Saturday will be Survivor Series War Games, and the matches as announced for the WWE World Heavyweight title. Gunther will be defending the title against Damian Priest, in a 10-woman, let's see, in the women's War Games match, 10 women War Games match. On one side, you have WWE World Women's Champion Liv Morgan, along with WWE Women's Champion Nia Jax, Candice LeRae, Raquel Rodriguez, and Tiffany Stratton, taking on the team of Bianca Belair, Io Sky, Naomi, and Rhea Ripley. And albeit it wasn't, they're still listing Jade Cargill here, but Jade Cargill was actually taken out of the match, and Bayley will be replacing her. In the men's War Games match, you got in the Battle of the Bloodline, the OG Bloodline has, of course, Roman Reigns, the Usos, Sami Zayn, and CM Punk, taking on the new Bloodline of Jacob Fatu, Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, Tongaloa, and Bronson Reed. So that's all we got for the wrestling wrap-up. Now I think it's a good time to now, of course, it's a good time to go over, with today being Monday, November the 25th, 2025, or 2024, rather. Man, sometimes you go this long and it gets y'all screwy. As we're approaching the 3-hour mark here. With today being Monday, November 25th, 2024, let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. So, 1949, 2019, 1944, and 2004. All right. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a... So, first off, I'm going to head back 80 years ago. As on this date, 80 years ago today, back in 1944, Warner Brothers' The Stupid Cupid premiered on this date back in 1994. It was a Looney Tunes cartoon directed by Frank Tashlin and starred Daffy Duck and Elmer Fudd, which Elmer Fudd, portraying the mischievous god Cupid, delights in shooting arrows at male animals to make them fall in love with the nearest female, regardless of species. This leads to chaotic and sometimes tragic consequences, such as a dog falling for a cat, prompting the cat's dramatic reaction. Amidst this chaos, Daffy Duck sings "Don't Sweetheart Me" by Lawrence Welk. So, 80 years ago today, the Warner Brothers cartoons that the Stupid Cupid premiered in theaters on this date 80 years ago today. So, moving on to the next piece of Nietzsche history here, moving ahead to 1949. On this date, 75 years ago today, the first issue of The Adventures of Bob Hope went on sale from DC Comics, known at the time as National Comics Publication, of course. Just goes to show you they were doing more than just superhero comics even back then. So on this date, 75 years ago today, the first issue of The Adventures of Bob Hope went on sale on newsstands on this date 75 years ago today. It's a bi-monthly title. Ran for quite a while, too. Moving ahead now to 2004. On this date 20 years ago today, as I find that. So on this date 20 years ago today, Silver's OVA Akane Maniacs, which was based on a video game, I believe, was released on this date back in 2004. So 20 years ago today, Silver OVA Akane Maniacs. Um, was released on this date back in 2004. It saw the plot of the anime was Joji Goda, the new transfer student at Hakuryo High School. On his first class, he fell in love at first sight for Akane Suzumiya and boldly proposed to her on the spot. Two characters conflict with each other greatly, but Joji never gives up and would do anything to express love towards Akane. All right, so um, but this is a prequel of sorts to Mud Love, but based on a video game. Um, so so with that, that happened 20 years ago, and finally, getting moving ahead to 2019, 5 years ago today. On this date, 5 years ago today, 2019, the night after that year's um, Survivor Series. So we talked about the Go Home Raw before um, this year's Survivor Series. Now we're talking about a Monday Night Raw that happened the night after Survivor Series from the All-State that was held by the WWE from the All-State Arena in Chicago, Illinois. That night saw, of course, in the main event, saw Kevin Owens defeat Seth Rollins by DQ. Rey Mysterio became the number one contender for the WWE United States Championship by defeating Ricochet, Drew McIntyre, and Randy Orton in a fatal four-way. He then promptly was able to challenge AJ Styles and defeated AJ Styles to become the new United States heavyweight champion. So that happened 5 years ago today. So with that, I do thank everybody for being here, being here for this especially long episode of the Mikestand. Sometimes it can't happen, I do usually try to keep them within an hour, but sometimes things like this happen where we really get into something, and I'm grateful for Metal come in and give his expertise on Rumiko Takahashi's works. Predominantly, of course, we're talking primarily about Ranma One Half, but also we got into some other. We talked a lot. We talked about Inuyasha, Urusei Yatsura, even some non Takahashi works like Bleach. So I do, and yeah, I see the smiley face there. So with that, of course, special programming note for everybody. We won't be no show on Thursday or Friday this week. Thursday, of course, is Thanksgiving. Friday is Black Friday. As you all, for those who've been around a while, I usually take these days off. Just let everybody have time with their family and all that. So I do thank everybody for being here tonight. And with that, we'll be back here tomorrow night with more Needs News, of course. And also this Sunday, I will have RJ Carter from Critical Blast joining me as we'll be taking a look back to comics that went on sale in April of 1940. This coming Sunday, we'll be looking at Super Mystery Comics #1 from Ace Magazines, featuring such characters as Ace's version of Vulcan, the Volcanic Man, Magneto, the Magnetic Man, and Q-13, American Fighter Spy, or Spy Fighter. So with that, hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.